Welcome into Northside Territory, Foul Territory Network podcast. I'm Sahadev Sharma with my co-host Patrick Mooney. Patrick, today we have a Northside Territory, Crush City Territory crossover. Our friend Chandler Rome, who's covered the Astros for 7 years, multiple of them with us at The Athletic. Also, the co-host of Crush City Territory, Foul Territory's Astros podcast is here to join us. There's a lot of Astros topics and Cubs topics that are crossing over this winter. So this is just a natural fit. Chandler, how are you doing? How's the podcast going? How is everything?
The pod's great, man. When you can just get Josh Reddick on and let Reddick just kind of flow. I mean, we don't really have to do much work because Josh is just that good. And Tyler Stafford and I think we play off each other pretty well. And adding Josh to the mix has been great. And there's been no shortage of content. We joke that we launched this thing like during the winter meetings, and of course that's when all hell broke loose. So we joked that I think our first 2 or 3 episodes were all emergency pods about guys getting traded, guys blocking trades. It was a hectic couple weeks there when we started, but it's settled down now, and I think we're in a groove.
That's good that you guys get along, because Patrick and I, man, it's just been a struggle. We are at each other's throats.
We never talk off air. Just
Go ahead, Patrick.
Well, no, Chandler, I love reading your stuff because you're so good at pointing out the tension and friction within an organization, and you do it in a very even-handed manner, finding out both sides and just kind of letting it breathe. And I was curious, sort of, how did Kyle Tucker handle being an Astro? It seemed like he kind of skated by because he wasn't part of the trash can operation. But I'd imagine playing in all those huge games and being on a team that was sort of, less than admired by opposing fans. Do you think that developed a sort of thick skin for him as he comes into Chicago, where he has to be the man in a platform year?
Well, I think the best word for Kyle Tucker is just kind of underrated, and I think that describes him personality-wise. I think that describes him on the field, nationally, how people view him. Obviously, since he's been traded, I think a lot of people have really started to kind of look at his numbers and oh man, this guy's really good. But just personality and in the clubhouse and as part of that team, he got dwarfed a lot he was in a clubhouse with Jose Altuve and Alex Bregman and Yordan Alvarez and Carlos Correa for a while, Justin Verlander, and when you have that many established superstars, you kind of get, I don't want to say forgotten about, but he didn't have to be the voice, the face, the guy that did all the interviews, things like that. He let all those other guys kind of take care of it. So he's a quiet guy. Doesn't certainly, to me, does not scream face of the franchise, but I think faces of the franchise can be a lot of different things. Look at Jose Ramirez in Cleveland. I don't think anyone would describe him as outgoing or, a guy that speaks up a lot. He just kind of goes about his business and does his work. And I think that's what Kyle does too. When he wants to say something, he will. And it's not as if he's mute, and it's not as if, guys don't look up to him. He was the Astros team DJ for the last 2 years in the clubhouse. Picked all the music, and he is low key. If you get to know him, he is low key hilarious, really funny, very witty, very dry humor. A guy that a lot of people in the clubhouse and I think when the clubhouse doors close, his personality comes out. But I don't think you're likely to see it much publicly. He doesn't play with a ton of flash, doesn't showboat. Will bat flip every now and then, but certainly not a guy that's going to be demonstrative with his actions. But he kind of lets his play speak for itself, and I think it certainly has throughout the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that this Cubs clubhouse is filled with outgoing personalities. There's nothing outside of Pete Crow Armstrong. There's nobody that you look at and say that's a flashy guy who has a lot of wild things to say. But they do have guys that are willing to talk, right? If Tucker isn't that person that's or kind of doesn't want to be that guy that you go to after every tough loss or every big win, there's Dansby Swanson, there's Ian Happ, there's even Jameson Tyone. Like these guys are willing to talk to the media and step up in those moments. I guess I'm most curious. How do you think his personality, his skill set, and everything? He's going to be the guy. That's what they've been missing. Like, forget about off the field leadership because I think they have that. They have a good clubhouse. They don't have the superstar. They finally do. Like, and this is going. No offense to Houston, but like Chicago's just a bigger market, and there's going to be a little bit more pressure with the Cubs. How do you think he handles all of that on the field?
I think it's I think he can do it. Like but the problem is like I've never seen him have to do it because like we've said, like he's had so many guys in front of him where we always are asking this question about Altuve or Bregman or Correa or Alvarez or guys like that. Like you have to go 5 or 6 names down before you start asking like how Tucker's going to handle it. And the fans in Houston were certainly sad to see him go, but I think one thing they pointed out was that his postseason performances the last 2 years have not been good. You look in the 2022 World Series, in Game 1 of the 2022 World Series, he hit 2 homers, almost led them to a victory. Justin Verlander kind of gave it away, but hit 2 home runs and was kind of the toast of the town. He's still the only player in Astros history to ever hit 2 homers in a World Series game. And since that game, it has been a real struggle for him in the postseason. And I am not one of these that subscribes to small sample sizes, especially when you're, facing elite playoff pitching. I don't think that's indicative of his career. Jose Altuve had an awful postseason in 2022 when the Astros won the World Series. But, I think it's worth mentioning. You asked the question. So he's been in a couple big spots, big playoff series, and he hasn't produced. Dusty Baker had to move him down in the lineup in the 2023 ALCS. And I'm not saying that this portends that he's going to, shrink in big moments in Chicago. I think he's also a guy that outwardly, like big moments to me, like really don't phase him. Like you're not going to see him tense up. You're not going to see him swing early in counts. You're not going to see him chase a ton. Like he keeps his approach and keeps his demeanor very well. He just hasn't gotten results the last couple postseasons. So I think that's maybe the one thing that I'd bring up that may concern me, but I use concern very, very relatively, just given, again, you're in the playoffs, you're facing the best pitching that's left. And it's tough to break down like that few at bats, but that is what he is. But I think he will handle the grind, like being the guy for 162. I think he'll handle that very well, just because, again, he is, I don't want to say emotionless, but he's just pretty close to emotionless as you can be. Like nothing really phases him. Nothing really gets him very excited. He's just a guy that just shows up, rolls the balls out there, rolls the bats out there, and he's ready to go from the minute he shows up.
So the Cubs make this huge trade, give up a bunch of pieces for 1 year of Tucker. And then a couple weeks later, they don't reach an agreement with him on an arbitration salary. We are probably too close to it in Chicago to where I think we were surprised but not shocked. What was the view from Houston on that particular decision? What do you think that means long-term for the Cubs and Tucker's future?
Well, this isn't new. He went to an arbitration hearing with the Astros 2 years ago. The Astros won. And then we talked to him in the clubhouse. It was in spring training that they did the hearing. And then we talked to him a couple days later. And again, like I said, nothing, you can't really get much out of him. Nothing really like makes him mad or tick. But, he acknowledged that there was some stuff he heard that he wasn't thrilled with, but was also very, very adamant in saying, he felt his relationship with the Astros was fine. And that it wasn't going to affect anything long term. And he even said that he would have liked to stay in Houston long term. But, he said that, I think, to you guys when he had his intro, said something very similar that, we'll always listen. We're always open to listening. And he said that in Houston, too. I think it's just odd from like a business. Like, how do you like the Cubs have known this guy? Obviously, they've seen him from across the way and can read his stats just like you and I. But like, I mean, they've known this guy for 2 months, and now they're going to go argue over what is it, like $2.5 million? It just seems like a very avoidable thing. But it's not new. Tucker had to go to an arbitration hearing here. They did settle last year without a hearing, and that kind of gave everyone, I guess, a little bit of hope that maybe they could work something out. But again, as long as Jim Crane owns the Astros and as long as they have this philosophy of we're never getting into the $250 million range, then they're going to struggle to retain a lot of these guys that are in arbitration and the guys that are a year or two away from free agency. And now Tucker's way past 200, 250. Like, it may have to start with a 3 or a 4 to even, get his attention to get something done before the season or midseason. Now, I'm not sure if Jed Hoyer has talked or whether they had any substantial extension conversations during the salary exchange deadline. That does seem like the kind of time where that happens. But to me, just looking 10,000 feet above, the fact that they couldn't settle and had to go to a hearing doesn't portend well that they got anything done.
Right. No, I mean, I agree. It's probably more bad optics than anything else, but it's also like an extension was a long shot, and I think now it's just like probably don't need to talk about that until we start hearing legitimate rumors about it. I'm curious, before we get to other players on the Astros that the Cubs or that have been on the Astros that the Cubs may be interested in, I'm curious what you've heard about Cam Smith. I think you guys talked to him recently. There's been a lot of love for him lately, and I think Cubs fans are like, what the heck? He wasn't getting this love when he was with the Cubs. No Cubs fans, he was. Like, I talked to a lot of scouts about him. People love him around the league. That's why when I heard his name in these trade rumors, I was like, oof, that could end up stinging, but you gotta do what you can to get a player like Kyle Tucker. I'm just curious what you've heard when talking to scouts around the league, and then what your kind of feel for him was when you talked to him.
Yeah, I'll never forget Sahadev at the winter meetings when I got kind of hint or that Cam Smith's name was getting thrown around, and I stopped you. I was walking to get coffee, I think, and I stopped you, and I said his name, and you looked at me like, oh, no way. Like, no way. No way they're trading him. And I was like, oh, well, I heard that's the name of life. Yeah, I got to talk to him. I talked to him a couple weeks ago, and I was really impressed. It was a 20-minute phone call. I don't want to make any less than a 20-minute phone call is, but seemed very polished, very, very committed, and very humble. And I'm going to say what he told me, and then I'll explain why it's humble. He compared himself to A-Rod, which on its face is probably not the most humble thing in the world. But then he goes, no. Like, please write that I'm comparing myself to A-Rod because I'm this tall and play the left side of the infield. And there's not many guys that do that. He was like, numbers wise, no way. But just body type and things like that. I found it interesting that he told me that one of the things that has really set him on this path is, he went to the Cape Cod League between his freshman and sophomore year at Florida State and kind of learned how to meditate, learned how to give himself a routine. And part of that is meditation. He listens to Bob Marley and the Wailers before every game and kind of puts his AirPods in, meditates, and he's ready to go. He said he meditates sometimes even when he's in the field, just to kind of center himself, and he also talked about he doesn't really follow prospect lists, doesn't really follow trade rumors. He said he had people texting him a bunch when the Tucker stuff was going down, but never really gave it much thought. And I was the one that told him, you're the best prospect in the Astros system now. And he's like, oh, really? Well, yeah, that's good to you. So I think he'll handle being the centerpiece of the trade, pretty well. As far as what I've heard from around the league, I have not heard a bad thing about him. I think there's questions about where he can play defensively. I think there's questions about, can he stick on the dirt or will they move him around to the outfield? Dana Brown, the Astros GM, has already said that they're going to try him in a couple corner outfield spots in the minor leagues. And I mean, obviously the bat is the big thing here. And as long as he hits, they will find a place for him to play. And sounds like he's going to get an NRI to big league camp, which a 22-year-old, that's going to be an interesting experience for him. I mean, never say never, but I would be stunned if he's on the big league roster at any point this year, just given his lack of professional appearances. And I mean, they need him to play a full season. He'll probably start at AA and kind of see where they go. But, I think there's a little bit, Cam even told me that they're working with him to pull the ball in the air a little bit more. There's some stuff about, just his swing and how he can loft the ball a little bit, pull it a little more. And obviously working defensively, he said at Florida State, he never really had to focus on footwork, never really had to focus on the minute things. He just kind of let his athleticism take over. But this is a low bar, but like he is far and away the best prospect the Astros have in their system now. And certainly going to be the guy that, Kyle Tucker could have a 30-30 year this year, put up a 7-win season. But if Cam Smith pans out, I think the Astros will look back and say that they won this trade.
Yeah, I saw it floating around on social media. There was a good photo of, I think, Cam Smith and Tucker together, the XL guys working out. Definitely encourage everyone to read that story that Chandler did with Cam Smith. It was a really good look at kind of how he progressed to this point. Shifting gears, I was curious, like, where are you at with the Alex Bregman? Like, where do you what do you make of these, short-term rumors after we turned out a pretty significant long-term deal from the Astros not that long ago?
I've never thought he was going to get the pillow deal, the Carlos Correa deal, I guess, of a couple of years ago, 3 years with 2 opt-outs. I've never thought he was going to get that, but the more it drags on, like, you have to kind of start to think that that's going to be the final answer. But the teams that are talking to him, like the Tigers, the Red Sox, the Blue Jays, like, they're not the sort of teams that you think, all right, like, they're only doing short term. I can talk myself into all 3 of those teams giving him a 6 or a 7 year deal. Like, that's just, they all have the space for it. They all have the need and the want for it. And they all have to, appease their fan bases, all of whom are at varying levels of angry. Probably the Blue Jays being the most angry, then probably the Red Sox, and then the Tigers. But all of those places make a lot of sense for him. I do wonder if there's a mystery team kind of lurking, like a D-backs Corbin Burns situation, if there's just a team that no one's talking about that's just going to swoop in and give him the big deal. I got a little bit of flack, and I guess I'll have a mea culpa here. I got a little bit of flack on Crush City when I called the Astros offer to him a lowball offer. It was 6 for 156. I guess as we're looking back now, it probably isn't as lowball as I thought. But the one thing I did want to make clear is that, they offered him that in November when we all thought we knew what Alex Bregman's market value was. We knew that, he was looking in the $210 million range. And my contention was that they offered him that deal knowing he would turn it down. It was one of those, like, performative, like, we tried, like, I mean, that would be the biggest contract in Astros history too. So it was one of those, like, hey, here's our offer. Like, they have never budged, from my understanding, never budged on that offer. So, I'm fascinated to see how it ends. I still have an inkling that he's going to get, I don't know if he'll get $200 million, but I think he'll get commensurate money in years, maybe something similar to what the Astros offered him, maybe a little bit more. But I think it's pretty clear that the Astros are out of it. Dana Brown said everything but that after they signed Christian Walker. And I know this doesn't mean much, but Bregman changed the profile pictures on all his social media that it no longer reflects Astros stuff. So I think that tie has been severed, but I'll be interested to see where it goes. I've always thought the Cubs kind of made a lot of sense, but I guess they're not spending money, or they're not spending for a long term.
They have a lot of financial struggles. When you own all of Wrigleyville, how are you supposed to spend any money? And that's clearly sarcastic for those that think I'm defending the lack of spending. I agree. I think Bregman makes perfect sense for the Cubs. There are going to be some that will say, "Oh, Crawford boxes, that's how he thrived." It's the same issue with Isaac Paredes. I think it's a little different, and I think people don't realize that while it's deep, like right down the line at Wrigley, they have the shortest left center gap in baseball. Like, you can poke the ball there, especially with the wind being blocked by the video board. I've talked to some people. This is a change in my opinion, where I thought he was he's all about the Crawford boxes. I think there's more to him as a hitter, and I think he'd actually thrive at Wrigley because of that. left center gap, and he can hit the ball there and probably steal some home runs. It's just the type of move that a team like this should make if he's going to do the opt-out stuff. I think the debate would be, is that if it's only 1 year, is it worth giving up the draft pick and the IFA money? Would the Cubs see that as valuable when they punch it into their computer and it spits out whatever it tells them to do? But beyond that, what we know, like that's a fit, right? Like Bregman's a fit. We don't really know if they're gonna like be aggressive there. Our guess is no, right? But they're going to get a reliever. They want a reliever that has, some late inning experience, some probably closing experience. Like this is going to be probably the thing that over the next month, Patrick and I are just waiting to like, okay, what's the information we get? Who are they targeting? My understanding, it's well over a dozen guys that they're talking about. But one that makes sense, not a free agent, but trade target, is on the Astros, Ryan Presley. Just tell me a little bit about, like, it took a little bit of a step back, I guess you'd say, last year. The strikeouts were down. ERA was fine. I don't think he was closing. Someone else is the closer now. I'm sure there's a good someone that I'm forgetting about. Oh yeah, Josh Hader. That guy's good. But he obviously has closing experience. Tell me about him and maybe what you know about his availability.
Oh, he's available. They have been I don't want to say aggressively shopping him, but I mean, they've made it known since November that they, and it's not even because of Presley himself. It's that they need their payroll is bloated. They have $31.5 million in dead money committed to Jose Abreu, who is God knows where, and Rafael Montero, who's going to be in the AAA Sugarland bullpen all season. They have $31.5 million committed to them. They have, I believe, $13 million committed to Christian Javier, who I don't think is going to pitch for this team this year. They've just got a lot of dead money, and Jim Crane does not want to exceed the CBT. Again, they did last year. He doesn't want to be a repeat offender. So they're looking for any way to get some salary off the books, and Ryan Presley is going to make $14 million next year. It was an uneven season for him from the beginning. When they signed Josh Hader, all the right things were said publicly. All the right things were said, after games in the clubhouse. But Joe Espada pretty much acknowledged at the winter meetings that it took Ryan Presley a while to adjust to being a setup man. And let's not forget, like, he did nothing to earn a demotion here. Like he was great in 2023, but they believe they wanted to build a monster back into their bullpen, and they signed Josh Hader. They kept Ryan Presley kind of engaged while they were talking to Josh Hader. I'm not sure that helped, but they did, it wasn't the situation where they gave Josh Hader all this money and then Presley had to find out on Twitter. They kept him abreast of the situation, but it was a tough, uneven season. And I say tough, like, had a 3.49 ERA, but a 3.10 FIP. Did not miss as many bats as he usually does. His strikeout numbers were down, but his batted ball luck was awful. So there's a mix of poor fortune, poor luck. There's also a mix of, you avoid poor batted ball luck by missing bats, and he wasn't missing as many bats last year as he did. He's 35 years old. He's just naturally getting older, and father time can creep in a little bit. I think he's still an elite reliever. I think, he has a no trade clause, and there's some family things here too. His wife is from Houston. Both of his children were born in Houston. I'm not sure he would jump at any opportunity to waive his no trade clause, just given the family situation. But I think if there's a team that promises him, you're our closer from day one, I think he'd do it. I think he would waive his no trade, and obviously the Astros would have to pay down some of that $14 million. But I think it's more likely. I wouldn't say more likely than I think it's right at about 50-50 now. But I'd put the odds, 50-50, maybe a little bit higher, 55-45. Yes, that he's not on their roster by opening day, and the Astros can do that because they have Brian Abreu pitching the 7th inning, and he's one of the nastiest relievers out there. Just move him up to the 8th. You have Josh Hader in the 9th, and I think they're looking to add another reliever as well. So maybe kind of move some money around, divide some of that $14 million around a little bit. But certainly if the Cubs can tell Ryan Presley, you're our closer, I think that would be a pretty attractive destination for him.
They can do that. Absolutely.
Jim, I wanted to zoom out at kind of like a closing type of question. I remember we talked getaway day in Wrigley up in the press box last April. On Baseball Reference now, on that day, the Astros fell to 7-19. The winning pitcher for the Cubs was Hayden Wesneski, and Hector Neris closed it out for the Cubs. At that point, we're thinking the Cubs are ascending, the Astros are toast. Obviously, the Astros make the playoffs. The Cubs don't. I feel like the Cubs and Astros have been kind of running this, start at a similar sort of race of the teardown. They got to the World Series, but Astros have kept winning. They've kept their window open. Do you think the Tucker trade and these moves this offseason will keep it open, or do you think they're about to fall off a cliff the way the Cubs did very hard a couple of years ago and have not bounced all the way back yet?
I think it's somewhere in the middle. I don't think they're about to fall off a cliff. I mean, they have Yordan Alvarez. They have Yainer Diaz locked up Yainer Diaz just is, I think, 3 years away from arbitration. So, they've got Yainer Diaz for a while. Hunter Brown had a wonderful season. He's first year of that 3-6. So, I mean, they've got a core around that, and Jose Altuve is obviously here forever. So, I mean, they've got enough players that I don't think it's going to be a hard faceplant off of a cliff. But, I mean, their window is diminishing. It's narrowing. This year, you trade Kyle Tucker, you move on from Alex Bregman. Kyle Tucker is 28 years old. Alex Bregman's 30 years old. You sign Christian Walker, who is 34 years old, to a 3-year deal. Christian Walker, who great defensive first baseman, has done a lot of good things, but the age is going up a little bit. You don't really know what you're going to get from Isaac Paredes. You hope the Crawford boxes, you hope all the pull power will show up. But I mean, I heard the same thing when they signed Jose Abreu, was that, the Crawford boxes are going to be the best thing in the world. And you look, I mean, you can put all the spray charts you want. I watched Jose Abreu for a year and a half. The Crawford boxes didn't help. So I mean, I think it's one of these things. I would never doubt them. I would never count them out. Just again, like you just detailed, they were 7-19 last year and won the division. I think that was more a byproduct of how poor the division was. The Mariners fell on their face. The Rangers really fell on their face, and the Angels and the A's kind of do their own thing. So, you wonder, like, with a full year of Jacob deGrom, are the Rangers going to kind of ascend? Are they going to get bounce backs from Semien and Seager? Can Seager stay healthy and kind of what they've done? Can they challenge the Astros? Are the Mariners going to spend money and have maybe a full year of a Rosarena helps them? Maybe they get pushed in the division a little more, but I think this Astros team, I certainly don't think it's like one of these that you look and they're going to be a bad club, but certainly not the super teams that we saw in 2018, 2019, 2021. This is they're aging, they're getting older. They're reaping what they sow for a couple bad contracts, for having a winter 3 years ago where they didn't have a general manager. They have not drafted well atop the draft. They didn't have first or second round picks in 2020 and 2021 because they cheated. The picks they did make before and after that in the first and second round have not hit. So they don't really have that core, that like next wave of like top end talent to come up. Cam Smith is probably the only top end talent that they have waiting to come up. So it's one of these things where I'm not sure if they are kind of staving off the inevitable, if they're just kind of kicking the can down the road. Like, let's try one more year. Let's try 2 more years to keep this going. And is it going to take an awful first half to just sell at the deadline one of these seasons and just tear it all down? Or is it going to be, be happy to get into the playoffs as a wild card and everything's a crapshoot and just rely on their muscle memory, rely on their playoff pedigree to get them through? That's what they tried this year and it didn't work. Maybe it'll work next year, but I don't think we're going to see like a total precipitous fall on their face off of a cliff. But make no mistake, the window is not as wide open as it once was.
Chandler, thanks so much for joining us. Everyone, thanks for listening. This is Northside Territory. Make sure to listen to Crush City Territory. Read my and Patrick's work covering the Cubs over at The Athletic. Subscribe, rate, and review to both podcasts. Subscribe to our YouTube channels. Read Chandler and his Astros coverage, the best there is at The Athletic there. Thanks so much, man. We will talk to you soon. Appreciate the time.
All right. Thanks, guys.